So today I continue the presentation that I started yesterday on MIES van der Rohe. I couldn't cover all his activity in one day, so we continue today. For those of you who didn't participate yesterday, and if you would like to receive the recording of yesterday, I would gladly send it to you. But I'm not going to repeat what I said yesterday because it is a very ample material. So today I only show the works that MIES did, you know, after, I mean, you know, starting with 1950s. And I will begin with this home. The language here belongs to Wikipedia, but it's a little bit problematic because a home should be kind of a residential, no? But anyway, that's how they write, residential home. It is actually a house, a home. The Robert McCormick house, which was strangely relocated to an art museum. So now it is not used as a house, but it is, you know, an item in a way in an art museum in Illinois. This is how the house was before it was located. In fact, it shouldn't be said relocated, but located, because it didn't originate on the grounds of the museum, but it originated here. It's a fine building. It's you know, a so-called classical MIES van der Rohe. He, if I understood correctly, MIES was desired and also was able to create some kind of a dialectical balance between nature and architecture. His building is distinctly different from nature, and but I think he wanted to have some kind of an equilibrium, a balance. In a way, a balance through contrast, because it is a contrast here between his building and the trees and, you know, the natural environment. An ample house, a rich house, an opulent house. I don't know if this is inside the museum or, you know, I see many people there, or there was a party or something. What can I say? You know, these buildings, in this case, the house doesn't really look like a public building, as sometimes some works did look. I mean, I'm talking about a few houses he built in Germany that the expression of the house is a little bit unsettling, because at least this is how I perceive it, perceive them and perceived it, that it didn't really look like a home or like a house, rather like something else, a school or a kindergarten, as I said yesterday. Here again, we see something that is also used. He used exactly the same thing at the Farnsworth House, the famous house he built, where the counter of the kitchen is placed in this way. So when you work at this counter, you turn your back on the natural light. And to me, and again, I'm not a functionalist, but I think it is incorrect. I mean, maybe the word incorrect is not the most appropriate, but I think it's actually unpleasant to work with your back towards the natural light. You know, I understand the reason why he did it, but I think it's problematic. And he used it, as I said, in another famous case, and I see the same thing here. Of course, you can turn off the artificial light, but when you have a beautiful landscape around you, to turn your back on it, and when you work at the counter of a kitchen, you kind of spend some time there. You don't do it in just 30 seconds. So I don't know. Anyway, you will also see something else very soon, having to do also with the orientation of the one who sits on a chair in relationship with a glass, in relationship with a window, like here. Now, these people face the light and the window and the trees and the nature outside. These people sit with their backs. Personally, now, I don't know, but I imagine it was him who made this design, this interior design. It's an unfair situation, I think. These people are darkened, you know, so to speak, because their faces are not lit by natural light. These people, so it is an unfair situation. I would have placed, if you allow me to correct Miss, I am now in a, as you can see, in a strange didactic mood. I would have placed the two rows of sitting perpendicular on the window, so all parts would have seen the nature. Anyway, maybe it's not so important, but for me it is. It's a big house, as you can see. What can we say? It ended up in a museum. For me, this is strange, you know. It's not his responsibility. It was not his responsibility. I don't know why a house should end up in a museum. It could have been used, but maybe it's better in a museum than to be destroyed. Now you can study a little bit the plan. And here is the kitchen that I mentioned that is kind of strangely, but he did this before. This is not the first time. The thing is, when you quest for a pure design, and you are very sensitive to, you know, the idealism of the forms you use, you risk, and particularly in his way of working, because he uses very strict geometry. You know, accidents are not easily possible in the work of MIES van der Rohe. He was not an architect to make room for accidents. Everything was controlled. But when everything is controlled, there is a risk that life in its richness does not always find room in your system. And this is, I think, what is happening and what happened in his work. The plans are very nice, very clean, very, you know, so on and so forth. But there are problems, I think, because the dynamics of life are more complex and more fluid than the most perfect rigid system. Anyway, we move forward. This is the house, modular house, if I can say so. Why is it that nature doesn't really work with modules? Or if it does, those modules are not really identical. So the work of man is, if it is inspired by nature, should work with modules in a more flexible way. Unfortunately, this is not done easily, I guess, and so then we use regular modules. But the regular modules, regularity in an explicit way is not found in nature. It is a good building, though, even within the site of a museum. Now, we arrive at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. In my opinion, not one of his best works. It's okay, but it's a little bit hybrid, and his architecture is truly not at ease with hybridity. Not so much because or maybe this because of it too, because it is a curved facade, and he very rarely worked with curved facades. In fact, I don't know of any other building except a proposal for a skyscraper when he was in Germany, which was not built. This one is curved, but I don't think the curvature is the main problem of this building. I think this base is, I don't know, it's a little blunt, you know, it's so opaque, exactly at the level of the passerby. I mean, it's not inviting. And as you can see today, I'm a little bit in a critical mode. I usually am not like this towards such giants of architecture as MIES was. But as I said last night and today and in the evening yesterday, when I worked on this second presentation, at one moment I became a little bit bored, to be honest with you, because it's too much the same system, really. There are qualities like here, the interior, obviously the space is well structured, there is a sense of order. Not everything is bad, far from it. But I don't know, compared to his masterpieces, this work is a little bit less. And he uses this system of supporting, you know, like, okay, here is the curvature, but most of his buildings are like this. It is like a box supporting by little legs, and I don't know. But here, for me, the main problem is this wall here, which is so uninviting, you know, exactly at the level of the viewer and the passerby. It's a blank wall, you know. And the material, if it was, let's say, with a different texture, tactility, maybe stone or even bricks, or it's a wall without glory somehow, for my taste. Anyway, this one we saw yesterday, and I'm not going to see it to show it again now. One of his most important works is where the Illinois Institute of Technology College of Architecture is. Truly a very fine building, one of his best. Maybe at the end, if there is a request, I could show it. But since I presented it yesterday, I will not show it again today. This one also I showed yesterday, the North Lake Shore. But in the case of MIES, really, well, yes, the Crown Hall is very special, but still so similar to other works done by him that, if you see a few buildings by MIES in his later activity, you saw almost all of them. The Promenade Apartments, I showed, Seagram Building, I showed, Caroline Winslow Building. This one is this one that we just saw. And now we arrive at the Home Federal Savings and Loan Association building in Iowa. Again, it's MIES, you know, that he uses a curved facade or not, but essentially it's the same kind of architecture. I don't know. I mean, if you see one building like this, 3 buildings like this, 5 buildings like this, you know, maybe it's enough. But unfortunately, most of them are like this. So that's why I think that there was a reaction to MIES van der Rohe, despite his fame, which was deserved, because he was without doubt a great architect. But people got tired, you know. I mean, how many buildings a la MIES could you have, you know, in the world? It's getting tiring, you know. You just want something else, even if it's something worse, but different. I mean, he perfected the system, but he didn't leave room in that perfected system for accidents, for interventions, for individual deviations, and so on. Now, this complex of buildings, residential development in Detroit is fine from 1959. Well, the tree is fine, the grass is fine, the bushes are fine, but the building is fine too. This one, and you'll also see some tall buildings with a lot of green space around them. And I imagine it is a pleasant environment to live in. This one has an elegance that is difficult not to perceive. Somehow, because of the blackness, it makes me think a little bit of the Bryn Mawr College, dormitory by Louis Kahn. Different like architecture, but still having blackness within the greenness of nature. This is, I think this building is excellent. You know, he was able from time to time to create a difference within his oeuvre. And in this case, he did, I think. And I will read a statement of the photographer who took these photographs and who actually lived in this complex of buildings for a few years in order to be able to understand it properly and find the right moments when to photograph and so on. And the description is very appreciative. The trees are magnificent too, aren't they? So this is what this photographer who lived here said. At Lafayette Park, Miss Van der Rohe creates a dramatic dialogue between architecture and nature. The photographer said, the geometry of the grid just juxtaposed with the natural surroundings is always inspiring. Nature creates the space that frames the architecture in place, allowing the simplicity of its beauty to radiate. So Miss Van der Rohe designed Lafayette Park with the urban planner, with urban planner Ludwig Hilbershammer, a very important urban planner, and landscape designer Alfred Caldwell on the eastern edge of downtown Detroit. And it wasn't just that low height building, but also taller buildings. Also this one, which I don't know what its function is, but it looks interesting. I couldn't find out what its function is. It might even be a parking lot if it doesn't have windows, although I don't know. But I also am not totally sure this was designed by MIES, but I imagine it was, because it was part of a presentation that was concerned with the buildings by MIES in Detroit. So both these towers, or these tall blocks of flats, were also designed by MIES. And I like this picture very much. That's why I used it in the announcement for the presentation today. Because in this picture, I think it's an excellent picture, and MIES should have been or could have been very appreciative, because it's a perfect balance, I think, in this picture between the work of man and the work of nature. And in this case, the grid that MIES used, it is distinct from the very different so-called system of nature, but somehow is not irritating nature. Is some kind of a relationship, yin and yang, and I like this. The distinctiveness of the work of man and the distinctiveness of the work of God, meaning nature, and the two complement each other. At least this is what I see in this picture. Now you can tell that there was here a good landscape designer and urban planner, the choice of the trees and the open spaces, and this is done with skill and knowledge. Now, the Pavilion and Colonnade Apartments, a residential complex in Newark, New Jersey from 1960. This one also is a fine building. despite the fact that it doesn't surprise us a lot, I still think it's a good building because because of the proportion of the structural system and the grid that he used. And there is a certain sensitivity in this building that I admire. I don't know so much about this side, but I don't know what could have been done. Usually the narrow side of such a building is opaque. Well, this is not so narrow, and so he used a lot of glass windows, but I don't know. But this part is very well proportioned, I think, and then it is. It has a certain level of discretion, although it is a big building. It's a situation kind of similar with what we saw in Detroit. Later career worldwide. So from 1961 to 1969, when he died, Mies died in 1969, he built also outside of the United States, and you are going to see a few works. The Bacardi office building in Mexico City from 1961. We know by now that this should be by Mies, and it is indeed by Mies. What can we say? As Peter Eisenman asked, make a language, invent a language, create a language. And he gave us an example, the ex-president of the United States who had, that's what Eisenman said, who invented a language and he became the president of the United States. Mies didn't become the president of the United States, but became a very, very influential architect, also because he invented a language. In my opinion, sometimes he fell victim to his own language, his own system. But maybe in most cases, or in a good number of cases, his system worked, and he built elegant and dignified buildings. And this is one of them. But it's true, don't expect much surprise or many surprises in the work of Mies. Once you saw some works by him, that's it. The interior is very elegant, yes, it's fine. And I'm not saying that, we should sacrifice quality to novelty, but human beings also need surprises, and he is not very surprising after a while. But I like this building and I like this interior very much. It's elegant indeed. But it could have been anywhere, really. This could have been in Chicago. It happens that it is in Mexico City. It could have been in Australia, in Europe, in China, you name it. So his architecture is rather of a globalist nature than localist nature. And certainly his architecture is not local. In other words, to use the Swedish word of, I don't know what year, 8 years ago or so, meaning both global and local. His architecture is concerned with globalism, not with localism. It ignores, the local culture. And I think also this is problematic. I mean, why is this building in Mexico City? It almost doesn't matter where it is. He designed it, for a placeless place in a way. It's elegant. Look at the plan. It's perfect, but maybe it's too perfect. It's just I don't know, so in a way complacent with its own perfection. I mean, it's elegant, I repeat, and I like it. I like it. It's even, graphically, this you can put on a wall. But it's a dead-end street. You cannot go from here anywhere else, but remain trapped in this perfection. Yes, everything is perfect, but too perfect somehow, if I can say something like this. In the case of Lina Bobardi, somebody talked about the perfection of imperfection. Here, I almost feel tempted like talking about the imperfection of perfection. Residential apartment complex of 3 towers in Quebec, Canada from 1962. Again, MIES, unmistakably. Although there were many architects who followed him and used the same system, maybe with less grace. But all in all, it's a system that is so easily decipherable and so easily recognizable that, you know, again, you have no surprises. It's on the other hand, it can be confusing. As myself, I got confused. Sometimes one building built in Canada looked like a building built in Chicago, looked like a building built in Mexico City. It's because there are no specificities belonging to the local culture at all. But strangely, or maybe not so strangely, at the beginning of his career in Germany, he was building differently, because maybe he was still rooted in the local culture, his own, the German culture. But now he arrived at the universal language, but this universal language ignores the local conditions, which are real. You know, I'm not even mentioning climate, although I should mention it, of course. These buildings belong anywhere, anytime, somehow. And I think he wanted them like this. One Charles Center office tower in Baltimore, Maryland from 1962. Again, you know, it's MIES. But in this case, I think grace is not in an abundant quantity, if I can use a questionable language. It's a big building. It's a mammoth building. I mean, look at this here, you know, and also here he deviates from the prism is not as clean any longer. It has this part. Of course, he creates this corner, which I suggest to you to if you are interested in MIES, you'll arrive at interesting studies, because at the corner here, he becomes almost ornamental. The structure is, there is a peculiarity that he uses there, both at the Seagram building and here, and actually in other buildings as well, which shows a certain complexity that he had. Structure there is respect for structure, but there is also respect for some kind of a questioning of the primacy of the structure. So you see here in the corner, unfortunately, I don't have a detail here, but there is going beyond the necessities of structure. And he resolves this corner in with a certain capriciousness or subjectivity that relates to art more than to engineering. I keep thinking that he was a poet of the right angle and of the straight line, and even a mystic, I would say. But he pushed too far, I would say, this so-called mysticism. And there is also, I think, a complicity with capitalism, with serving these big offices that is, in my opinion, a little bit problematic. But I understand for an architect it's difficult to become critical of the very institution or client that you have, as for example Goya did in his paintings. For a painter is easier, for an architect is more difficult, although I'm wondering if it's not possible for an architect to also become sometimes discreetly or subtly sarcastic towards an institution he doesn't quite believe in. and to do it in such a way that the client doesn't observe. Here, what do I see? This black, huge, big building that celebrates what, actually? You know, let's see the function. It's One Charles Center. It's, you know, an office tower. I don't know what kind of company it was or is here. Anyway, North Lakeview Apartments, I think this one is in Chicago. Yes, in Chicago from 1963. He was able to achieve multiplicity in unity or diversity in unity. I mean, his system is not totally unable to accommodate various expressions. As you can see, this building is different from the previous one. This one is with apartments, it's not with offices. But in essence, it's a big prism, a big box sitting on some pilotis, on some columns, and that's it. I don't mind somehow this, the predictability of his first floor is, makes me tired after a while, because literally he repeats this over and over again. And yeah, you can get tired. I got tired. Morris Greenworld House, vacation home. I don't know if I have pictures. I do. You know, not very different from the other house we saw, but this is MIES, without question. Although there were other architects who worked, imitated him or followed him and so on. In my opinion, and I know I say something outrageous maybe, but in my opinion, MIES, although he contributed a lot to the city of Chicago, I think he also destroyed it. Because of his ignoring of the local culture, Chicago, by following MIES, turned its back on Frank Lloyd Wright and Louis Sullivan, the local architects, equally universal, but they were also local, while MIES was just universal. And this is seen in Chicago even today. Chicago is still trapped in the Miesian paradigm, and it has difficulties to escape. The power of this man was immense. He built a lot in Chicago. Chicago followed it because he was seductive. He was coming from Europe. He was a former director of the Bauhaus. He had a good reputation. And I think by doing so, Chicago betrayed its own specificity, exemplified just, but not only in the two architects that I mentioned, Wright and Sullivan, who were very different architects from MIES. On the other hand, imported European architecture in Chicago was not necessarily a bad thing. What was bad was the excess to which it happened. Its excessiveness. It was excessive. That was the problem. If it was just in a moderate way, it would have been okay, but it was not. A big house, of course. MIES didn't build social housing. You know, he didn't build like Louis Kahn until he was 55. You know, poor little you know, apartment buildings or you know, row houses and so on. MIES built you know, for I would say for the well-to-do. Now we arrive at the business, not the business, the government center of Chicago, the Chicago Federal Center. It's a civic complex from 1964. So, you know, the political, the social center of this very important city of Chicago. There were several buildings built there. these are the ones, the Dirksen Federal Building, Office Tower, then the Kluzinski Federal Building, Office Tower, and the United States Post Office, Loop Station, General Post Office. It's kind of interesting that in the States, some very important public buildings have private names, like here, you know, Dirksen Federal Building. Well, if it's a federal building, why is it called with the name of a private person? The same, then the second one, the Kluzinski Federal Building. Maybe it was, I don't know who that person was. Maybe it was a political character or a great donator, I don't know. But the streets, you know, at least in New York, they have numbers. Very rarely you come across streets that have names. They have numbers, but the public buildings sometimes at least have private names. This is just a thought. I didn't investigate too much about it, but shows certain peculiarities about the public and the private in the United States. The buildings, again, this is MIES, very, very elegant. You can take a beautiful picture like this picture. But why do you think there was a need for this sculpture by Alexander Calder? Well, try to remove it. Well, it is orange, right? It is organic. It is wild, so to speak. Well, because there was a need of this. There was a need for Alexander Calder here, because without this sculpture, the environment would have been a little bit too, doesn't matter how you know, refined and beautifully executed and perfect it was a dead-end street, as I said, a closed system. And you needed the art, you need the exception, the accident of art. And you know, that's why the sculpture there, yes, it's a sublime architecture in a way, but somehow too sublime and too distant from you know, the tumultuousness of life. And you see reflected here the sculpture by Calder. You know, look at this picture. You know, we need art, we need color. And you know, even MIES cannot get rid of this need. This is what happens when you use the perfection of a Cartesian system, rational system. What do you do with the other side of life, with what is organic, what is colorful, what is even imperfect? It is needed. And then the artist tries to make up for that, you know, for that loss, for that absence. Even here, you know, maybe the buildings, if the buildings had these fluidities within them, the artwork by Calder would not have been necessary, but they don't. So that's the problem with systems in general. You know, they are necessary in a way because you can control a certain set of problems by using that system. But the problem is the system, especially if it's too perfect and too refined, doesn't allow for accidents. And those accidents belong to life. What is this? Originally rental apartments and now condominium apartments in Baltimore, Maryland, 1964. Again, MIES. But really, if the whole world was covered with Miesian buildings, I would have lost my mind. I mean, it's just too much. We needed some. We need difference. We need other things. You know, really, if this man would have covered the whole earth with his buildings, I think we would have been in great need of certain hospitals for mental disorders. It's just too much, really. It's too much. Maryland, you know, Baltimore, Mexico City, Quebec, Chicago. I really don't understand. He was not aware of this. I think even Descartes would have been, you know, tired of this. At least I hope. University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration from 1965. Again, MIES. You know, I almost feel like smiling. I mean, you know, of course it's MIES. Who else could it be? Unless some follower, you know, humbly following the master. And I like MIES, don't misunderstand me. But I think he went too far, building too many buildings kind of similar. You know, just build a few, MIES van der Rohe, and it would be fine. He didn't change, you know. He didn't change. Once he arrived at the system, that was it. He didn't have the courage that Le Corbusier had. Le Corbusier, of course, terrorized the whole world with his dogmas at Siam, Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne, you know, and when the whole world finally followed him, he built Ronchamp there, you know. So MIES, no way. Once he arrived at his system, that was it. And he could have done anything, really. The world was in love with MIES. He could have built even Saint-Pierre de Firminy Vert by Le Corbusier. He could have built it. He could have built anything. But no, he went safely on his road. And here they are. MIES and MIES and MIES again. Too much, monsieur, too much. Richard King Mellon Hall in Pittsburgh, there, here, again, MIES. He became a signature architect. He has a style, his own style, but I don't know. It becomes tiring, suffocating, actually. You know, too much Cartesianism and too much rationality. Although he was not a, in fact, there is some madness in the system. You know, as Hamlet said, you know, I am mad northwest. There is some kind of madness in excessive, you know, in any excessive system, because it becomes obsessional. It is an obsession. He didn't get tired of it. Meredith Hall, School of Journalism and Mass Communication, Drake University, a good university in Iowa. Again, the same. It's the same. It's the same. The plan is, there's a variation of what we already saw. It's not bad, but I almost feel that another architect, it would have been better if another architect built this building, even if worse, but to be different. Now you might say, wait a minute, this was not supposed to be an homage to MIES. It is, and it is sincere, and I was sincere, and I actually love MIES. But I think he became mad towards the end of his life. You know, he didn't change anything. This is in Monreal. There, here, again, you know, is the box sitting on some columns and have a receded entrance. He always does this, always. This is also probably his, the same way, you know, I mean. I can still take some pictures. This one I showed yesterday, a very important museum, the Neue National Gallery in Berlin. He has masterpieces in that punctuate with distinction his work. This is one of them, but unfortunately I showed it yesterday, so I'm not going to show it today. The Brown Pavilion, a Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, we already saw that curved. Here we see the plan. You remember the views of this facade in Houston, and I don't know of too many. In fact, I don't know of any other building with a curvature in his work, but this one does have it. The Toronto Dominion Center Office Tower Complex in Toronto, a big ensemble of buildings. What can we say? It's fine, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that isn't a but here. You know, I mean, I love this picture, of course. It's magnificent. And here I think he transcends somehow the Cartesian system, although that's exactly what it is. But the elegance, the nobility of expression is, in other words, quality overwhelms quantity or measurement. And it's architecture, yes, with a capital A. Maybe even this in this picture we see architecture with a capital A, but here I don't know. Aren't they a little bit ominous? These towers, you know, in the stiffness, in the almost blackness. You know, to me they seem to be a little threatening. I mean, look at the other building, you know, existing there in Toronto, or even this one. These are huge. These are mammoths. They are huge and they are rather black. A filling station. This one I like. It's a gas station, believe it or not, but it was closed. It's not functioning. I hope it was not destroyed. A gas station by MIES, but it's fine. First of all, it's more discreet. You know, it's open, but I saw some nice pictures with it. Maybe not so much here. Here, yes, it's MIES and MIES and MIES again. But look here, you know, who would say this is a gas station? It doesn't look like a gas station. It could very well be the underbelly of an art museum or I don't know what, but not a gas station. It is a gas station, a closed one, but it was a gas station. Anyway. I think if MIES handled programs of this nature, you know, like a kiosk for selling newspapers or a gas station or a little grocery store, something more human and, you know, I think he would have become a more complex, he would have had a chance to laugh at himself a little bit, which probably would have been necessary. It's nice. Yes, this is nice. It's almost like untouchable. I mean, you know, how could you have a gas station that looks like this one? No way. It is intimidating. The car would melt down. It's the one Illinois Center. This was built. We are approaching the end of this second day of presentations about MIES. Completed post-mortem. So he died in 1969, and this was completed in 1970. Is this building here. Now, Chicago is a splendid city, but there is a but here too. Maybe it's difficult a little bit for me to explain what I mean by this but. I think this is a tower by Helmut Jahn. So this is MIES. It is elegant, it's true. I mean, if you compare it with some of the other towers here, it is elegant. So this was finalized after his death, post-mortem. But it's still, even though it is elegant, and I'm the first to recognize its elegance, it is bulky. It is a bulky building. It is, you know, it doesn't have any longing for slenderness, as this building has, for example. Anyway, but I'm absolutely sure that if it was up to him, the whole city would have been covered with such buildings like his. And that would have been as excessive as the towers that Le Corbusier proposed for Ville Radieuse. Architects really should be not given too much power, because they could become, excessive in their desire to cover the whole earth with what they think and what they feel. The Martin Luther King Library, Memorial Library from 1972 was completed post-mortem. This is a model. And we already see the concern with, although it was in 1972, but to bring grass and green on top of the building, something he didn't have a preoccupation with when he was alive. Otherwise, the building is as black as many other buildings he built. And I wish even Rem Koolhaas built this library, Memorial Library, but not MIES. Anyway, Rem Koolhaas did have some kind of himself, like a contesting son, some troubling dialogues with MIES. And he wasn't the only one, you know. There are other architects who became tired of MIES and they wanted to break his system and probably replace it with their own system. Because that's what happens, you know, the revolutionary, once the revolutionary gets the power, he becomes as totalitarian as the dogmatic one they just replaced. That's why revolutions often end up in conformity. You break down a system in order to build another system. It's the fatality of human affairs. 1973, American Life Building in Kentucky, completed by this man, Bruno Conterato. What can we say? I mean, if we didn't know it was by MIES, we would not have talked about it. But because he was involved in the design of the building, we talk about it. Otherwise, it's not an exceptional building in any way. What can we say? It's the typical MIES, you know, a box sitting on columns, and with the first floor, you know, receding, and that's it. It's, in my opinion, a little bit unsatisfying. The IBM Plaza in Chicago, 1973, also completed post-mortem. This one has I remember when I created the PowerPoint presentation, it has a certain elegance from a certain point of view. Yeah, here, I mean, I like what I see because it is, somehow, it does have I would say, a high level of elegance. Without, you know, offering us great surprises, but it is elegant. And now we are going to see, towards the end of the presentation, some buildings, in fact, all the buildings he built on the site of the Illinois Institute of Technology campus from 1939 to 1958. So almost 20 years of great activity. He designed the site plan, he was the urban planner, and also designed all these buildings. Unfortunately, as you are going to see, in my opinion, many of them are rather pedestrian, they are not very interesting. There are a few jewels there, but not many, and we talked about them yesterday. The Minerals and Metals Research Building from 1943, yes, MIES, but I don't know. Is it a great building? I don't know. I said I don't know in order not to say something else. It's okay, I guess, but there is a but. Then the Engineering Research Building in 1945. Again, welcome to MIES van der Rohe. The same, it's the same. The Alumni Memorial Hall, the classrooms, 1946. So he built about 20 buildings there, but they're not really. This one is a little bit better, but still too similar to previous buildings that he built. Yeah, it seems only here in the corner he is allowing a little bit of playfulness, you know, but otherwise the system is strictly followed. But, you know, not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, I will talk about Hans Hollein, in a way, the opposite of MIES. Everything Hollein did was out of a system, out of the box, whimsical, very interesting architect. Too bad he lived in the postmodern era, but a very interesting architect. Okay, other building. Now again, you know, you even forget the name. You know, they're all the same. You know, look, what is the difference between this building and this building? I'm not even sure if it's not the same building, although it has a different name. But they are so similar that it becomes exasperating. Again, you know, this is what you get when you are concerned with globalism and not with localism. Polstein Hall, 1946, a little bit different, but not fatally different to make it truly a surprise. And yes, he's indifferent to the cardinal points. It doesn't matter, east, west, north, south. No, MIES is doing his game, you know, so to speak, with a tenacity that characterizes good German. You know, he's very devoted to the system. Now here is finally an exception, finally a surprise, but because of the function, because it's a boiler plant. So the function generated inevitably, he couldn't do the same kind of building. So this is an industrial building. It had to be different. Look at this. But even this one is not so very different. But this one at least has old cars in front of it. And, you know, those old cars add a new dimension, aesthetically speaking. The building is still MIES somehow, but because the function is different, it looks a little bit different. Now, what a great relief to have this diagonal here and this one here and their shadows. Truly, this accidental presence here makes all the difference in the world. In fact, all of a sudden I can breathe again. You know, I am again alive because of this accident, which probably had nothing to do with him, but with the necessities, the technological necessities of the functions of the building. I'm so happy that, you know, this incongruence happened. What if Bernard Tschumi was right when he said form follows fiction? After all, what is function, you know? We take function as some kind of a datum that is, you know, written in stone, so to speak. But what do you do when you know, a building changes function? And it happens very often. You know, like for example, in Sibiu, they were building a new city hall. And then the revolution came in 1989. The structure was already built. The building was up, but there was no need, or so they thought, for a new city hall. And after a few years, when nothing happened, that structure became a hotel. So there, what is the relevance of function, really? In a way, Bernard Tschumi was right. It is fiction. It is fictional. You know, it's some kind of a mental scenario that we make up, but, you know, the building could very well change its hands, it changes its functions. And so, anyway, This is a subject to think about and to talk about. We are so, the functionalists are so concerned, you know, with expressing honestly the function of the building. But what if the function changes? And there are such cases a lot these days. What if this plant becomes a cultural center, for example, or I don't know, you know, in fact, it's very interesting. I even thought of a possible strategy to do very interesting projects. In other words, if you are to, let's say, you have to design a cultural center, and you begin to design not a cultural center, but I don't know, a stadium or a hotel or a housing complex. And after you design it, you transform it into back to the function that initially you. It's like having a building that was built for a function, and then you change the function of that building, and something interesting happens. In other words, to start doing a project by ignoring the function that was given, and at the end to bring in that function and accommodate it within a structure that was intended for a different function. I don't know if I explained well. Maybe it's my, frustrated and rebellious side that talks like this. Maybe it's nonsense, but maybe not. Anyway, I was just thinking about what Yumi said, that form follows fiction. Okay. The Institute of Gas Technology, this one I couldn't find pictures. I only found pictures of that gas station. That's why I don't show any picture here. American Association of Railroads Administration building. Now the College of Music building, this one also I couldn't find pictures. Mechanical engineer, probably they are so banal, sorry, Miss van der Rohe, that I couldn't find pictures of them. Neither of this one. The Carr Memorial Chapel, this one I showed yesterday, unfortunately for those of you who were not here yesterday. The American Association of Railroads Mechanical Engineering building. You see all the buildings are dedicated to kind of similar functions. The Carmen Hall at IIT, this one I think I have pictures, the dormitory, but again and again, this is MIES. No really surprise, sorry. It's okay, but there are many buildings in the world kind of similar. That's the problem here. His impact on the world was immense, really, because not just in Chicago, and not just in the United States, he was followed religiously, but everywhere. And so we have such architectures all over the world. The Cunningham Hall dormitory from 1955. What can we say? It could have been by another architect, but it's by MIES. And now it is refurbished. It's during, after not such a long time, after all, 60 years or so. But then the School of Architecture built by Peter Eisenman in Cincinnati, after 20 years, since it's coming into being, needed an immense investment in order to refurbish it and restore it, and that's because modern architecture is kind of like this. It needs interventions. When I visited the Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright, there were ladies there, the interns, who asked you to donate some money to contribute to saving the building, because the building was falling apart, because the Frank Lloyd Wright, or should I say Frank Lloyd Wrong, didn't listen to the engineers who advised him not to put the building above the falling water. But he ignored them, and the building had big structural problems because of the conjunction, the presence of the water. I mean, the building was just above the water because he didn't want, like his client expected, to have the building look at the falling water from a distance. He placed the building just above the falling water. And the structure was seriously affected. Equally, when I visited La Tourette, the monastery by Le Corbusier, I saw unbelievable disturbances, at the foundations and so on. The masters of the modern movement, I'm not including here MIES, because I think MIES was good at technical matters, but those who advocated spatial freedom and freedom in general didn't always work with sufficient knowledge or even interest in solving, classical problems having to do with firmitas, with stability of the building. And certainly this happened with the building of the School of Architecture in Cincinnati by Peter Eisenman. And even Falling Water, as I said. I have a presentation with Falling Water where I show a lot of people there with a lot of sophisticated equipment, with their feet in the water, doing all kinds of sophisticated activities relating to saving the building that Roy didn't think of. And maybe he didn't even care of. Maybe you know the anecdote that one night he was called, Frank Lloyd Wright was called by Mr. Kaufman, the client of Falling Water, who said to him, Frank, it is raining in the living room. There are leaks. And a sleepy Frank apparently answered, hey, Edgar, you don't have a pot? So there, the arrogance of the successful architect. Bailey Hall, dormitory, 1955. We are approaching the end. What can we say about this? This is also in the process, was in the process of being restored. And this is probably a computer-generated drawing, or could have been drawn by a human hand as well. Well, you didn't need parametrics in order to handle the buildings of MIES. This was the good part, maybe. You didn't need scripting and programming. The IIT Commons building from 1955, the typical MIES, because he either worked with tall buildings or horizontal buildings like this one, almost nothing in between. There were no transitions. Unfortunately, we have the sun rays, the sunlight that brings in some diagonals, thank God. Otherwise, in his architecture, there would be no diagonal at all. The Crown Hall we already saw yesterday. The physics and electrical engineering, again, research building, research is this one. I would say a building without glory, sorry. It's just a tool. The building as a tool, but is certainly, in my opinion, it is not a singing building at all. The Ziegel Hall Ziegel Hall with classrooms from 1957. So all these buildings are on the site of the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. Now here, fortunately, we have some nature and ivy and the fall, the redness of fall, and it's already a sign of life, which is very welcomed, I would say. The American Association of Railroads Laboratory Building, all sound so serious. 1953, and serious it is. Look at this. Again, it's a building that if you have an artistic temperament, you wouldn't feel very, 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 very inspired to enter, I would say. The Metals Technology Building extension, this one I don't think I found pictures of. I found of the Metals Technology, but not the extension from 1958. That's it. So happy birthday, Miss van der Rohe, and we hope that where you are now, maybe one day you will begin to to design buildings a little bit differently.